The Stone Zone, with legendary Republican strategist and political icon and pundit Roger Stone. Stone has served as a senior campaign aide to 3 Republican presidents. He is a New York Times best-selling author and a longtime friend and advisor of President Donald Trump. As an outspoken libertarian, Stone has appeared on thousands of broadcasts, spoken at countless venues, and lectured before the prestigious Oxford Political Union and the Cambridge Union Society. Due to his 4+ decades in the political and cultural arena, Stone has become a pop culture icon. And now, here's your host, Roger Stone.
Hello, and welcome to the Stone Zone with Roger Stone. I am not Roger Stone. I am Mark Vargas, Newsmax columnist and editor-in-chief of Illinois Review, reporting for duty. I am filling in for Roger today, but he will be back tomorrow. We've got a great show for you, but what's the Stone Zone without Roger Stone? And so we're going to watch, it's about a 28-minute clip of Roger's latest interview on the Joe Pags show, where he discusses the first 100 days of President Trump's administration and what the JFK files will reveal. Let's take a look.
Advisor to President Trump, former advisor, but still lifelong friend. It's Roger Stone. Roger, how are you?
Great to be with you, Joe. God bless you. What a great time to be an American.
It really is. And we're seeing a guy who came out of the box just absolutely ramped up and ready to go. The fact that he decided he wouldn't fly over Western North Carolina to get to California, like Joe Biden flew over East Palestine for a year and a half, that tells you everything you have to know. Doesn't matter if it's red or blue. This guy is in it for the country.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting to me. I think, ironically, he's going to be a much greater president in this term than he would have been in a second term, which I think he probably won and was cheated out of. This 4 years in the wilderness, 4 years of fighting the tsunami of ramped up lawfare against him, of being able to assess who in the Republican Party was really with him and who was ready to turn the chapter on Trumpism, not realizing that Trumpism is far more popular than the Republican Party will ever be.
Yes.
I think he's going to be a truly greater president. Now, look, he was a consequential president in his first term. You can't deny that.
Right.
That was despite the fact that he had people around him who thought their job was to derail, delay, or dilute his agenda. But now I think he's got a much better understanding of Washington, politics, the two-party duopoly, the fake news media. He is poised to bring on, this golden age we talk about, the age of Trump, an unprecedented age of peace, prosperity, security, and justice for all Americans. It's going to be amazing. It already is amazing.
No, it is. I agree with you. StoneColdTruth.com. It's Roger Stone, host of Stone Zone. You've known him way longer than I have. I've interviewed him a lot. I know him to an extent, but you're friends. You know this guy, the man. He seems changed to me since he got shot in such an incredible way. It's almost as if he knows he's on borrowed time and says, I'm going to do anything that I need to get done for the American people. I'm here for a reason. Do you see that as well?
I definitely do. I mean, look, it's amazing that, throughout the time that he's been in politics, how often pastors would complain to me that they love the president, but he needs to talk more openly about his faith. And kind of like President Nixon, I think Donald Trump always thought his faith was like a private matter, not something to be talked about in the political realm. But now I think it's very clear. You could see it in his inaugural address. You could see it when he was on the stump after Butler, Pennsylvania. He understands that his life was spared for a very specific purpose, but for an 1/18 of an inch, he would not be with us. It's not that he is exercised about it. It's the contrary. He's very serene. He's very steady, but he understands that he's been anointed. The left can make fun of that if they want. I don't really care what they think anyway. But I think that he's in a small way, he's a changed man, and he moves forward with a purpose, knowing that he wears the armor of God.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, you actually see it in how he's acting. He's still the same guy, but there was something almost as if he went, "Wow, there is a bigger purpose than even everything that I've done up till now. And you see it in action. It's Roger Stone. Go get his book called The Man Who Killed Kennedy. TheManWhoKilledKennedy.com is the website. We'll get into that in earnest in a second because we're going to get the files soon. But when President Trump was inaugurated, hit the ground running, sat down, signed a bunch of executive actions, undid all the garbage that Biden did. But there's one thing that it felt like we were back to America, Roger. And this one thing is this. He started answering questions immediately. Anybody who had a question, he answered it. He didn't blow it off. There wasn't somebody hushing the press or pushing them out of the room. He sat there one-on-one. I mean, when he got on the plane and went to California and sat in the Lion's Den among Karen Bass and these other lefties that were sitting there, Ted Lieu and everybody else, telling them, you're going to get water. You're going to fix what's going on in Los Angeles. We're not going to have this garbage in America. And every question that came from left or right, he took it. We're back to almost where we were before Biden. I mean, it's going to take a while, but the whole Biden thing, the lack of transparency and no access at all to the chief executive, that was over like in the first second, wasn't it?
It was. By the way, I must say I've had it up to about here with Ted Lieu.
Yes, me too.
Look, I think the president watched Joe Biden, his inaccessibility, his inability to handle questions, the fact that they were hiding him, the fact that they were probably the least transparent administration in American history, and he decided to do the exact opposite. Now, he was amazingly accessible in his first term, but now he's completely accessible. Press conference today by Caroline Leavitt, a tour de force. I mean, just extraordinary. I mean, she's a very young woman, very capable, but it set a whole new tone of transparency. And I'm sure you saw this, Joe, in his remarks in Las Vegas, talking about the fact that world leaders would call for the president of the United States. And we're not talking about, somebody calling from a small African nation or a small Latin America or Central America nation. We're talking about world powers calling the president and, I'm sorry, the president's not available. Joe Biden's not available. He won't be able to call you back for a couple months.
Isn't that crazy?
And then not calling back at all because Joe was not lucid. So I think President Trump has looked at all of that, and he's decided to be the direct opposite. And this is going to be the most tumultuous 100 days since Franklin Roosevelt's 100 days, since John Kennedy's 100 days. You can already see it. And there's no slowing down. The man's energy level, I mean, he's only slightly older than I am, but he's leaving me in the dust in terms of the hours he's putting in. You said it best. I mean, he does essentially Washington, North Carolina, California, and then back to Florida to meet with House Republicans in 48 hours. It's amazing.
It really is. It's Roger Stone. Go to StoneColdTruth.com. Go to TheManWhoKilledKennedy.com. Get this book. We're going to get all the files released very soon. We're going to talk about that a little bit more in a minute. Also go to StoneZONE. Check out his show as often as you can. Also on WABC. The man's everywhere. So you've got plenty of energy, too. You mentioned Caroline Leavitt. When she walked out today, we saw a sea change from a complicit, hiding, cloaking press secretary that never answered a question, that only spoke in circular speak, never, ever, ever, never said what the president thought about anything, just kept saying, we've been clear, we've done the work, we've been clear. Caroline Leavitt walked out today and just put it in their faces. They're asking the stupidity of the question about why eggs cost more a week after Donald Trump took office, which she looked at them in the face and said, let me remind you what happened in 2024. Went down the list of how the Biden administration killed a bunch of chickens so we couldn't have more eggs. I mean, this girl, she's 27, Roger, and she's on the game this well in the first press conference. I'm looking forward to 4 great years.
And not once did she say, "Oh, I'll circle back around to you."
Never.
Not once. It was refreshing. What a refreshing change. She's very dynamic, and you're right. She's very young, but she's very, very talented, and it sets the tone. I mean, I think the president's staff. I thought this during the campaign. But, there were a lot of critics of the campaign. People said, "Oh, you're not doing this right. You're not doing that right." Wrong. I think Susie Wiles, Chris LaCivita, James Blair, Tony Fabrizio, our fellow Paisan.
Yeah.
These guys ran the best campaign in American political history. And I have the credentials to say that because I've been in 13 national presidential campaigns. This was
amazing.
Juggernaut and virtually letter perfect. So yeah, when they tried to stop the early voting in Pennsylvania in the middle of the day, we were in court within an hour and a half. Don't tell us that we weren't prepared.
Amazing. And got the ruling on your side quickly.
Yeah, and we got the polling places open back up. So, and this transfers over now to the White House staff, a relatively young staff. Susie Wiles, the first woman chief of staff for a president in American history, an amazingly able woman who has the president's trust and confidence and has put together an all-star team. But there's no hot dogging here, Joe. In other words, everybody's pulls in the same direction, and the guy who points the direction is Donald J. Trump. I like Marco Rubio. I don't always agree. I haven't always agreed with him. I agree with him on a number of things, but he's not setting our foreign policy. He's carrying out our foreign policy.
Yes.
It's the foreign policy of Donald Trump that he's carrying out.
Well, Roger, let me ask you this. What is the difference? In 16, he did great, but I think he came in thinking he would be the CEO of a business, and he didn't realize that there were so many, anonymous idiots in there that were stabbing him in the back constantly. Why was the job so much better this time in surrounding himself with people that would absolutely toe the line, which is what you need? Something changed in the past 8 years to where I can't say to anybody that he chose that I'm questioning it, not even one person. Why is it so much better this time?
Because I think he came from the world of business to the world of politics, and therefore he thought, not unreasonably, well, the Republicans have my back, and the Democrats, want to derail my agenda. He didn't understand that half the Republicans didn't have his back.
Exactly.
Half the Republicans thought he was an interruption of business as usual and the cozy relationship they had with Democrats. And now he completely understands that party, we're in a post-partisan period here where party is not what it's all about. Either you are a globalist, committed to war, committed to censorship, committed to big pharma and big food making whatever profits they can, regardless of what they're feeding our children or giving us in terms of pharmaceuticals, or you are committed to peace, free speech, and getting to the bottom of why we have a chronic child disease problem in our country, why we have an obesity epidemic in our country. This is the new divide. It's a realignment of politics. Forget Republican Democrats. It's not about that anymore. I mean, sure, those labels exist, but it's really about the outsiders, the regular people, those of common sense, versus this globalist worldview of we know better than you do. We're just going to strip you of your rights and do what we want.
Very, very well said.
And the outreach to Robert F. Kennedy, the outreach to Tulsi Gabbard, the outreach to Democrats like Rod Blagojevich.
Huge.
This is huge. This is a realignment like we had in this country in 1932, like we had in this country in 1968, and it's going to be a permanent realignment. All the sane people, sane with an N, the sane people with common sense are on one side, and the globalist elites are on the other side, and freedom is on the march, not just in this country, but around the globe. You see it starting around the globe. So I'm just happy to be alive. I'm happy to be a part of this. I'm happy that I have my voice back. People criticize Elon Musk. You know what? I wouldn't have my X feed back. I had $1 million, probably 1 million followers, basically 980,000.
Yeah. And
they decapitated me without explanation. And by the way, Joe, I have to say this. I'm still not back on Facebook. I probably never will be. So when you see Roger Stone on Facebook, please don't buy any crypto from him. Not me.
So I'll stop talking to the fake Roger over on Facebook. I'm with you. The social media sites are certainly coming back. Free speech is back in style. And I think you're right. Also, when you've got an administration like this one, when you've got a strong president like this one, the world leaders all say, okay, I think that we can go and do freedom and liberty again. Or the people of the world say that. It's Roger Stone. Go to stonecoldtruth.com. When you were working with Richard Nixon, now you and I have talked about Richard Nixon a lot. He was actually a great president who made maybe one mistake. He should have watched himself, should not have done everything that he did that led to him leaving, but a very, very good man and a very good American. Unfortunately, Gerald Ford's blanket pardon for Richard Nixon is what gave Joe Biden the okay, somehow, to pardon his entire corrupt family, to pardon the corrupt J6 committee, to pardon Milley and to pardon Fauci, to pardon his son. These blanket pardons, these pardons for no reason, they're all preemptive, basically are based on the fact that Richard Nixon got that. And I don't think that it should be okay. Now, I can't stop it. Neither can you. It's in the Constitution, broad powers to pardon. But when you saw that happen, and every stupid pundit out there blamed it on the blanket pardon or the preemptive pardon for Nixon, what did you think?
Well, first of all, I mean, the Constitution and the law are what they are. And Gerald Ford had the authority to pardon Richard Nixon for any crime he may have committed.
Right.
Because the spectacle of locking up a president, particularly given what we now know that the Watergate operation was essentially a CIA takedown, declassified documents in the last year have proven beyond a doubt that the CIA knew in advance about the Watergate break-in, infiltrated the Watergate break-in team. This was a takedown. They took him down for the same reason they tried to take down Donald Trump.
Yes.
They thought he was the ultimate, hardliner, when in fact he was for peace. So, yeah, the strategic arms limitation with the Soviets, opening the door to China when China was a dirt poor, backward, agrarian society with no technology at all. I mean, they didn't have indoor plumbing or electricity, Joe, outside their cities. He had no way of knowing that Bill Clinton would later sell our top military secrets to the Chinese and give them most favored nation trading status. That's what made them the dangerous superpower that they are today.
Yes.
To go back to your question, all of the people who were screaming and hollering about the fact that President Trump pardoned me and General Flynn and Paul Manafort, saying it was outrageous, now they're fine with the blanket pardons of people like Adam Schiff. But here's the thing. When the president gives you a pardon, you have to accept the pardon. Now, when I was pardoned, I accepted the pardon, not because I was guilty, but because I knew that if I went to an appeal in the District of Columbia, I could not win. You can't win a rigged card game. It's not possible. So I knew that it was either die or prison or accept that pardon. So I accepted, even though I still maintain Roger Stone did nothing wrong.
Roger, let me interject this for those watching. You were, in fact, charged. This is not preemptive with you. With these guys like Schiff and Cheney and all these, Kinzinger, all these idiots on that panel, they weren't charged with anything, nothing whatsoever. So to your point, they all should have said, I'm not taking a pardon. I did nothing wrong. Now, you didn't do anything wrong, but you knew that you were in the midst of this lawfare where they were trying to end your life or take all of your money and imprison you. That made sense. You were charged with something unrighteously. You were charged with something incorrectly. It was lawfare. That pardon makes sense. None of these people were. Why does Fauci come out and say, thank you for the pardon. I didn't really need it, but he accepted it. Why did he do that?
Well, because I suspect they all did this. I mean, because they're guilty. Adam Schiff was among those pardoned. If you're not guilty, then don't accept the pardon. I mean, in my case, we now know that the judge hid exculpatory evidence from my defense attorneys. I mean, this was the ultimate lynching. And the prospect of my raising the money for an appeal while incarcerated was impossible. 68 years old, looking at, almost 4 years in prison, in a prison, by the way, where they insisted there were no COVID cases. I've had a lifetime history of asthma, when in fact there were 200 cases. So
of course there were.
I was facing a death sentence if I had not accepted the pardon, in all honesty, even though I know in my heart that I did nothing wrong, and the evidence now proves that.
I just hate that they're using the precedent with Nixon to say it's okay to do it for all these guys. They're completely different things. And that bothers me.
Well, they certainly would have lynched Nixon if they had had the opportunity. Yeah. They hated him all the way back to the time that he exposed Alger Hiss as a communist spy. Which, by the way, when Russia fell and we had the KGB records, we found out Alger Hiss was a communist spy, was a Russian spy. So, no, I get your drift on this, and I completely understand it. It's particularly egregious, I think, in the case where he pardoned his own family.
Yes.
I mean,
and the spouses, everybody. I mean,
because they were all on the take. That's why.
Are you surprised, Roger, he didn't pardon himself, or do you think he thinks he pardoned himself by pardoning all of them?
It's hard to say, but here's what I do know. It's very interesting. All these people have been pardoned now, cannot avoid questioning if they're subpoenaed. Now, if they commit perjury in the District of Columbia, they don't really care because none of them will be held to account in the D.C. court system.
Right.
no Democrat, no leftist, no person who's committed a crime, no matter how egregious, who's on the left, will be convicted in D.C. However, the House can have field hearings around the country, and they can call those who have been pardoned in for testimony by subpoena. They can't deny those subpoenas. If they perjure themselves in Chicago, or they probably not a good example. If they perjure themselves in a field hearing in Mississippi,
Yeah.
be charged in Mississippi, and maybe we'd see a fair trial of these people. By the way, that's what Senator Joe McCarthy did quite successfully, and a bunch of leftists did perjure themselves. So I think in this case that those who have been pardoned, there's a downside.
Yeah.
They can't plead the fifth in any proceeding. And therefore, they should be called to testify to uncover what really happened in the Russian collusion hoax, in the Ukrainian impeachment hoax, in the January 6th hoax.
100%. I hope the investigation continue. I had Jamie Comer on the other day, the Oversight Committee chair, and he said they are going to continue, and they're going to bring him in, and if they plead the fifth, they could be in contempt of Congress, as you said. It's Roger Stone. Go to themanwhokilledkennedy.com. Let's talk about the release of the Kennedy papers, the MLK papers, both RFK and JFK Kennedys. With those coming out, you say in your book it was LBJ. Are we going to find out that it was LBJ who set this up with JFK?
Actually, I think more precisely what I say is that it is LBJ at the helm of a plot that includes the CIA, organized crime, Big Texas Oil, the Secret Service, who stood down, and the FBI is more involved in the cover-up than they are in the original plot. As far as these upcoming disclosures, I think we're going to nail the CIA part of this. I'm sure you saw this, but last week, Alex Jones released an audio tape between Cliff Carter, the executive director of the Democrat National Committee under LBJ, and Billy Saul Estes, one of Johnson's well-known cronies who went to prison for corruption, in which they talk about the fact that Johnson hired a man, Malcolm Mac Wallace, to kill John Kennedy. Mac Wallace's fingerprints are found on the 6th floor of the Texas School Book Depository building.
Wow.
On the window casing and on the cardboard boxes that fashion the so-called crow's nest from which the shooter shot. 6 people, Joe, saw a man who meets the physical description of Malcolm Wallace in the window.
Wow.
So the Johnson part of this, I think, is nailed down. What we're going to get out of these upcoming releases, I think, is the CIA piece of this will be nailed down. Read Sam Giancana's daughter's book, and you have the documentation of the mob's involvement in the assassination. Big Texas Oil is in there as well. So piece by piece, this is all coming together. Robert Kennedy, this is pretty simple. Thomas Noguchi, the coroner of LA County, very respected, says that Robert F. Kennedy Sr. died from 2 bullet wounds from the back of his head, the base of his neck at point blank range. That means the pistol right up against your head.
Yeah.
But Sirhan is always in front of Kennedy. And he gets off 8 shots, all of which are accounted for, and none of them hit RFK Sr. So what are they hiding here? And in the case of Dr. King, the King family brought a civil suit against the FBI, the Memphis police, the Secret Service, and the federal government, and they won. That means a federal judge in civil court ruled that the government was complicit in Dr. King's murder. But you don't read about that in the mainstream.
No, well, you don't. And Roger, I want to bring up something when it comes to JFK specifically. Is this why Mike Pompeo is so adamant that Donald Trump the first time didn't release this information, because he knows it's got CIA all over it?
You beat me to it, Joe. There's no question, because in 2017, all these documents were scheduled to be released under a law passed in the late 90s, unless the president objected. And the president gave me the impression he was going to let it all out, and at the last minute, he held about 20% of it back. And when I asked him why, he said, well, Mike Pompeo thought it would expose our sources and methods. And I said, well, what's there? And he said, it's so terrible, I can't even tell you.
Wow.
It's so horrible, you won't believe it. Someday you'll know, he said. So the fact that Pompeo was protecting the agency, I think, tells us everything we need to know.
Are we going to get it all, Roger?
I do think we're going to get it all, but again, it's a larger puzzle. So, for example, the House Select Committee on Assassination, set up in the late 70s, they focused only on organized crime. That's because those hired to run the committee and staff the committee were experts on organized crime, prosecutors. That piece has been established. The the Johnson piece is more than established. Read my book, The Man Who Killed Kennedy, The Case Against LBJ, and this new audio tape. And now the CIA role will be firmly established.
Okay, one last question. I appreciate the extended time. We'll make a couple of really great parts out of this for the radio show and also for our streaming. So those of you watching and listening, you're getting extra time with Roger Stone. One last question on this. So it gets released, and if what we're saying here, what you're saying specifically, and what Pompeo did in the first Trump administration is, if all that's true that the CIA is complicit, do you make it go away? Do you revamp the CIA? I mean, all these people who were involved back then are dead. I mean, what do you do about it now?
I think you make sure that our government isn't involved in future assassinations. In other words, I'm very happy to see the president declassify this information on JFK, RFK, and MLK. Joe, I want to see the declassified documents on the attempted assassination of Ronald Reagan. John Hinckley Jr. is in a crouching position in front of Reagan. He gets off 4 shots, all accounted for. Reagan is shot from above and behind.
Yes.
But we have no government. There's nothing that's ever been released. We have a brief statement from Vice President George Bush saying an investigation determined there was no conspiracy. Sorry, that's not good enough for me. I'd like to know more. And I want to know the truth about Butler, Pennsylvania.
Oh, absolutely.
West Palm Beach. So I think that this is a domino effect that we're going to ultimately learn that the same bad actors, not the same people, but the same mentality continues to exist in these agencies. That's why I'm counting on Kash Patel and John Ratcliffe and by the grace of God, Tulsi Gabbard to help clean up these agencies, clean out these agencies so they're not involved in a future assassination attempt on an American president.
And what we're talking about is quite obviously what we always call the deep state. So the deep state could go away. This could be it. This is their last breath. Once they release these files, if this shows the deep state's been running things for 60, 70 years, then the dismantling of it is obvious. It's got to happen.
And it all begins with the murder of John F. Kennedy. I mean, Dwight Eisenhower tried to warn us on his way out the door. Remember, he said, beware the military-industrial complex, this conglomeration of accumulated power by people who were never elected to have this power. By the way, Eisenhower, one of our greatest presidents, he's so low-key, doesn't get the credit that he deserves, but we had unprecedented peace and prosperity and transparency and balanced budgets under Dwight Eisenhower, and he tried to warn us about this as he was leaving.
It is Roger Stone. StoneZOne is his show. He's the host of, course, StoneColdTruth.com. Go to the website, themanwhokilledkennedy.com. Themanwhokilledkennedy.com. Get the book. Roger, there's so much interest in the release of these papers. It would behoove people to read your book first, or at least while they're getting the information, and put it all together. They're going to find that you were right, as usual, on this, and I appreciate you coming on and talking about it. Is that the only place to get it? Can they get it on Amazon everywhere else or not?
Well, yes. Look, if you want to go give money to a multinational corporation, take your guts, go ahead and buy it on Amazon. But, folks, if you buy it, get the paperback. It has 3 additional chapters. It's much superior to the hardback. You can get it at Amazon or Barnes & Noble. It's readily available. But I think it will put everything in context for you. In the JFK researcher community, there's not unanimity. There's some people think it was just the CIA or just the mob or just Lyndon Johnson. No, it is all of them. I'm updating the book because I have even more information that I didn't have at the time I wrote it. So there'll be a new version out relatively soon. But if you want to understand what happened in its totality, and I'm not criticizing others. So, for example, James Douglas has written a book, JFK, The Unspeakable, that Robert Kennedy Jr. speaks about. I've read the book. He's right about all of it, but he only has a piece of the puzzle. It's reflected in my book. But if you want to see the big picture of everyone who's involved and what their individual motives are, well, The Man Who Killed Kennedy, The Case Against LBJ, you can get it at themanwhokilledkennedy.com.
Themanwhokilledkennedy.com. Go there right now. Check out his show every single day. Check him out on WABC on the weekends as well. It's our good friend Roger Stone. Roger, thanks for making time. I feel better. I know you're a little bit under the weather. And let's talk again soon, my friend.
Thank you, Joe. God bless you. And let's God bless America. We are in for a golden age of peace, prosperity, security, and justice.
100%.
Roger Stone proving yet again why he is a legend and an American treasure. An incredible interview on the PAGS show. Again, I am Mark Vargas, editor-in-chief of Illinois Review, filling in for Roger. I can promise you that he'll be back tomorrow. But we've got so much to cover here in the last 30 minutes of the Stone Zone. A big day on Capitol Hill tomorrow, Tuesday. Why? Because it's when the Senate Finance Committee is expected to vote on Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s confirmation, vote him out of committee before it goes to the full floor of the United States Senate for a vote. The vote out of committee will take place tomorrow morning, and rumors flying that Senator Bill Cassidy, who voted to convict President Donald Trump in 2021 for inciting an insurrection. Cassidy is a Republican and chairman of the Senate Health, Education, Labor, and Pension Committee. He is also a member of the Senate Finance Committee. Rumors circulating that Senator Bill Cassidy is non-committal and that he may not vote for Senator Kennedy. And if that happens, it is going to greatly stall and doom Robert F. Kennedy's confirmation. And so there's a lot of pressure being applied, so much pressure that from Louisiana, his home state, there are support letters literally flying in support of RFK's confirmation. I mean, let's go back to the position that we're in, that we find ourselves in today. I mean, does anyone, including the listeners and viewers of the Stone Zone, does anyone believe that America is healthy? Absolutely not. We've got a chronic disease problem. We've got an obesity problem. We've got a heart disease problem. We've got a diabetes problem. We have a mental health problem. We have a drugs and substance abuse problem. We have Americans live with illness and disease more than any other modern country in the world. That's a problem. Our American children and grandchildren are dying at rates far higher than children in other wealthy, developed countries. That's a problem. And yet, with all of these issues facing Americans, this really is a public health crisis. And let's say you may not necessarily agree with Robert F. Kennedy's stances on vaccines. You cannot squash his entire confirmation because of a single issue. This is far bigger. The public health crisis facing America is far bigger than any one issue. People are dying. Children are dying. And Senator Bill Cassidy wants to play politics, and he wants to be non-committal on such an important vote. And so joining me to discuss this and more is Edward Szall, an investigative reporter and producer of Died Suddenly. Ed, welcome to the Stone Zone. Really glad you're able to join me. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me on, Mark. You know, it's this RFK hearing debacle, and I think honestly, with all the confirmation appointments being held up, you know, this is the latest battlefield, I think, for many of us to be investing our time. I know you've spent a lot of time learning all the players and pieces in regard to Senator Cassidy. It does seem that there are Republicans, it's not even Democrats, there are Republicans that are using the confirmation hearings to try to leverage their wish list or to try to get back at President Trump and others. And it's just unacceptable. And we have to figure out the way, I think, not only to expose their bias and their concealed interests, but also to explain this to the American people, that this is the deep state in action. This is the corruption that holds back any change in this country. And it starts with what's happening to RFK Jr.
You know, I'm going to read this very briefly. We've got support coming in, as I said earlier, throughout Louisiana, we have a support letter for RFK's confirmation from Governor Jeff Landry. We have another support letter from Dr. Ralph Abraham. He is the Surgeon General of Louisiana. We have another support letter from Mr. Patrick McGrath, the chairman of Louisiana Senate Health and Welfare Committee. And so key players, we have support from the Louisiana Republican Party and various health groups. Despite all of that, Ed, we still have yet to get a commitment from Senator Cassidy that he will vote for Robert Kennedy in committee tomorrow. I mean, it really is mind-boggling, and it's really tough to wrap your arms around this when he's got all of the support from his own constituents, people that elected him and put him in office to represent their interests.
Well, it shows you it's not about the constituents, isn't it? That's what it tells you. He does not care about the constituent support. This is clearly about something more. And I know before the confirmation hearings, I was hearing that Senator Cassidy was going to be a problem in the sense that he was already trying to war game how he would get more funding for healthcare and other slush funds in his state. And I think the delicate part of this is that obviously we don't want to bruise the man's ego so badly that he takes some suicidal stand, which would result in him getting primaried and removed from office, right? We don't take this and then stop RFK Jr. from coming in, but we also need to make clear that this is not the time to be playing games. The presidency that has come in is the main object of the entire party. Everybody who claims to be a Republican, claims to be a conservative, anyone who cares about the future, you have to support the president's agenda, and that includes his nominees. I mean, the president of the United States was almost killed twice, okay, during his candidacy. He's made it to the Oval Office now, and now he's having to fight with Republicans who wished him well. I feel so terrible about the assassination plots and these other things, but you know what? I am going to assassinate your agenda. I'm going to assassinate your nominees during the confirmation process. How is this any different? Obviously, it's not a physical assassination, but it is killing the HHS director coming in if, again, he pulls this move. And look, I've heard a lot of things this weekend, especially, Mark, from Christians who are like, I think I understand why Vice President Mike Pence is leading this initiative to not support him, because he's not pro-life. That's so much BS. I mean, people may or not know this, but Mike Pence is making a ton of money as a consultant to oppose RFK and others like Tulsi Gabbard. And look, RFK Jr. is pro-life in the sense that the things that he is going to do are going to preserve the lives of the unborn. They're going to grow strong families, strong kids. How can you not be more pro-life than that, right? To clean up the food that's literally killing our children. But again, it's not this constituents. It's not about the health. It's about money to Senator Cassidy. And I think that's the route we have to go to try to leverage him.
Ed, I spoke recently with a former nurse or a nurse who is incredibly supportive of RFK's confirmation. And she mentioned one of the reasons why she left medicine altogether is because she was working with children in pediatrics. And she brought up one story where she had a literal tray of 8 different vaccine shots that she was supposed to inject in this little baby. And the doctor just said, well, just give it to them all at once. And she was very uncomfortable having to inject this little baby with 8 different vaccines in a single visit within a 10-minute time frame. And as I said earlier, children are getting sicker. We have children, American children are dying at rates much, much greater and far higher than other children in wealthy, developed countries. For Senator Cassidy and other Democrats to be making this vaccine issue a #1 issue, not to support his confirmation, I mean, it defies common sense when you say, let's vaccinate kids with everything we've got. But yet, on the other hand, we're seeing children die at historic rates. I mean, does common sense play in any of this, Ed?
No, it doesn't. And again, let's go there. Let's go there with Senator Cassidy. All right, your state is impoverished. What kills people in Louisiana is being poor. Okay, not having a proper education to be able to get a higher skilled job, also not being educated enough to really take care of yourselves from the level of knowledge about what could actually be a way to stay fit, stay healthy with diet. I've looked at the statistics for Louisiana. It mirrors very similarly to West Virginia in the mindset. Look, there are certain things that Senator Cassidy could do to advocate for his people. I think Governor Sanders, for example, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, rather, the proposal she made this weekend to RFK Jr. about changing the kind of food that could be bought through the SNAP program. All right, that's something real that could actually impact the people of Louisiana. This grandstanding over vaccination and over, well, I'm not really sure that this man is going to actually be able to rein in anything. He's just going to be someone who will be a detriment to the health of Americans, and he's not Christian and he's not pro-life. It's all grandstanding, because ultimately there are things that Senator Cassidy could be advocating for, and one of the first things could be is making sure that Louisiana's groundwater is not polluted. Could be increasing some of the regulation on where factory waste and factory disposal gets placed in the state. And also, I would say this from the other end: if Senator Cassidy were to help on the nomination, it might also bring in more business. There may be defense contractors. There may be other industries that would love to come to Louisiana as a place that has cheap labor. Skilled labor, cheap labor, could be a great place to invest, but it's all going away if he is the deciding factor on RFK Jr.'s nomination failing. I think that's a fact, Jack, and he's not going to be able to get away from that.
Just a week or so ago, I interviewed O.J. Siemens, executive director of COLT, the Coalition of Large Tribes. They make up the 50 largest tribes in the United States and over half of the Native American population. And just one simple example, Indian Health Services has been grossly underfunded year after year after year. And indigenous peoples are literally dying because they don't have hospitals or medical clinics within a several 100-mile radius. Children are dying at birth because they don't have maternity wards or OBGYNs. They're having to deliver at home or in the car, having to put them in an airplane. Another example, Ed, that is just so alarming to me is that if you're in Indian country and you lose your hearing, you've got to choose which ear you want a hearing aid in, because Indian Health Services will not allow you to have 2 hearing aids. You can only have 1. And they're not the most modern hearing aids. They're the older hearing aids that literally take up your entire ear. I mean, we've got the health and wellness of Indian country here on the line. And for Senator Cassidy to be playing politics, this is far greater than his tenure in the United States Senate, far greater than what's happening to his own constituents in Louisiana. I mean, literally tens of millions, hundreds of millions of lives are depending on Robert F. Kennedy's confirmation to make America healthy again. And President Trump.
That's why this pushback, Mark. That's why this pushback. I guess we should have expected this, because what RFK Jr. is proposing to do is to completely change not just healthcare in this country, but the way we treat those that are impoverished, that are a part of minority classes. That you mentioned, the Indians, the American Indians. The biggest thing with the American Indians is I'm quite enthralled with the refocus on the American Indians, because this group has been left alone. They've been left to the wayside. What RFK Jr. is talking about doing is actually, for once, a Republican administration could do meaningful action to help them. And it's funny. I'm actually nursing a little bit of a cough from the DC trip and some of the trips this last couple of weeks. I'm not satisfied with the state of sanitation in our airports, and I think a lot of people, they get sick now when they travel. And this maybe isn't an RFK thing, but I think it might be. I think the regulations that are in place at the airports and a lot of places that we travel through, they meet the standard, but honestly, they fall short of doing anything meaningful. There are plenty of diseases and other things which will transmit through the country, especially through migration. It's why the border crisis is tied directly in with anything that we do to try to increase the health of the country. But what we're doing right now for, let's say you go through a metal detector and an x-ray machine to enter the airport to travel. But we're not doing much and I wouldn't advocate for the screening they would do, but we're not doing much to make sure the person sitting next to you on a plane or sitting in a console with you doesn't have some terrible communicable disease that they should be staying home from. And I say this with a pause, because I'm anti-mandate, anti-lockdowns, all these things during the pandemic. But again, there is a common sense approach to these actions. What one could be that we have things installed at airports which would look for heat and kind of infection markers, and that at least would maybe be a better thing than scanning for guns that no one's bringing and the people that are smuggling. But HHS Secretary RFK is going to think outside the box. Sorry, and that's the kind of thing we need to actually change this country.
I'm going to advocate right now, Ed, for let's make Ed Szall healthy again. Let's just skip
Please,
back.
thank you. And I know maybe you got lucky. I came back with this very weird cough, so and I'm nursing it a little bit. Thank you.
Well, listen, your insights are absolutely essential, and I appreciate you joining me in here. So stay tuned for the big hearing tomorrow, the vote coming out of the Finance Committee tomorrow. We'll be following this incredibly closely. But Ed, in our last sort of 10 minutes, and are you able to stick around for another 10 more minutes, or do you need to go?
No, I can stick around. I just need to get some fluid in my throat real quick.
No, that's all right. There's another issue that I'd like to talk about here, and this is about migrant money. And this came out yesterday, and Elon Musk posted about this as well. But we're learning about the Lutheran faith, and we've got a post on X from General Flynn on this. Lutheran Family Services and affiliated organizations have received billions and billions of dollars of American taxpayer money to help Lutheran immigration and refugee services, $367 million. Lutheran Social Services, $134 million. Lutheran Services Florida, $82 million in federal money. And it goes on. Billions and billions of dollars have been awarded to organizations affiliated with the Lutherans in order to care for our migrants, while at the same time our own residents are dying, they're sick. We've got major battles going on. We're facing a public health crisis. And once again, we're seeing all of this money being allocated to areas where it shouldn't be. Ed, your thoughts on this post and what Elon said, what Doge will be looking at?
Well, I think there's quite a lot of slush funds in this country, and the HHS has been doling out these grants to more than just the Lutheran organizations that were listed there. I think as we dig, we're finding all these places where the money is just, the checks are just being written. There's no money backing it, but they're getting written nonetheless. I think for these religious organizations that have facilitated, migration, they're no longer a religious organization. First of all, they are a illegal migration laundering firm. That's what they are, and they should be considered to be no different than a cartel in sorts, especially in classification for nonprofit status. I find it intriguing that as we're trying to discuss why Americans are obese, why Americans' IQ have dropped, why Americans are having a hard time, avoiding cancer, diabetes, all kinds of chronic diseases, that we are spending without accountability copious amounts of money on migrant care. But that is partly how the game works, right? Because I think the migrant care, it's the ticket item. It's what they put on the notes for the accounting. It's not really what the money's going toward. It's going toward organizations getting paid off to facilitate the mass migration, which will then cause balkanization and replacement in our inner cities. And the inner cities have to remain chaotic for the democratic elite to remain in control of those fiefdoms of sorts. I mean, you're living in one of the meccas, I think, for that model. It's old Chicago. I love the city. I don't love the leadership. And I certainly think that the migration that's come into Chicago, for example, has been for profit. It's why all these nonprofit religious organizations that receive grants from HHS and USAID and all these other government agencies, it's funny, they're doing it for profit. And I say that not flippantly. We actually interviewed a pastor down in Mexico about 3 years ago now. That man was explaining how his church which had dropped in attendance, was not performing services anymore. Essentially, was not a religious organization, right? But what they were doing was they were housing migrants. And the man said on camera, well, you know, the reason why we do it is cha-ching, cha-ching. Cha-ching, cha-ching. That's the sound of U.S. money hitting the bank accounts of these cartel-associated former religious organizations. And if we're going to tackle migration, and especially tackle corruption, I love that Doe just found some things that the incoming RFK, Secretary of HHS can do to try to clean things up and put more money back in our pockets, Mark. I mean, the American people, they're not doing great right now. I've talked to a lot of people. I also look at a lot of statistics. For savings right now, credit card debt is at an all-time high. Savings, most Americans have about $500 in their bank account. Right? We don't have any extra money to be giving out. It's time for the golden age to begin. Back to this, we can't start the golden age unless the golden age cabinet is brought in. And that rests on some of these senators to not play games at this time.
You know, it's remarkable that the Maui fire victims, which is still very suspicious. You've lost everything that you own. The only thing you have are the clothes on your back. Joe Biden, here's $700. That's all we can afford right now. Here to the California wildfire victims, here's another $700 so you can help. To the residents in North Carolina who are still struggling, here's $700. But yet we're handing over billions and billions of dollars for migrants. And in this story, Ed, it is just absolutely remarkable and reiterates the importance of what Elon Musk is doing at the Department of Government Efficiency. We're going to play this clip of Vladimir Zelensky talking about the $177 billion in U.S. aid, taxpayer money that was sent over to Ukraine. They've received $77 billion. The $100 billion that landed there in Ukraine, he doesn't know where it's at. Let's watch this clip.
Дивіться, я коли чую, і раніше чув, і сьогодні ми чуємо від Сполучених Штатів Америки, що Америка дала Україні сотні мільярдів, 177, якщо сказати більш точно. Така звучала точна цифра, яку підтримували або голосував Конгрес, тощо різні організації. Дивіться, я як президент воюючої країни вам говорю, ми отримали більше 75. Тобто 100 мільярдів з цих 177 або 200, говорять навіть деякі люди, ми ніколи не отримували. І це важливо. Бо ми говоримо про конкретні речі, бо ми отримали це не грошима, а зброєю. Ми зброю отримали на 70 з чимось мільярдів. Є навчання, тренування, є додатковий транспорт, є не тільки ціну на зброю, були гуманітарні програми, соціальні тощо. Але коли говорять, що Україна під час війни отримала 200 мільярдів на підтримку армії тощо, це неправда. Я не знаю, де всі ці гроші.
In that last
That's so infuriating.
clip before the edit, he goes,
Oh my goodness.
the money's at. $100 billion missing. Poof, gone. Ed, what in the hell is going on?
Mark, for him to be so flippant about that money, look, even if it was millions, he should still give a crap about the fact that we're saying we gave you 200 million. In this case, it's 200 billion. He's like, oh, well, no, we only got 75. 125 billion is just missing. The size of some GDPs of countries is missing in our funding. Look, Vladimir Zelensky, he cared to come over here and beg constantly for money, constantly for weapons, constantly for resources that had to be taken away from Americans and given to the Ukrainian people, or it looks like, to the pockets of oligarchs. I mean, listen, Vladimir Zelensky knows a little bit. I bet if he was asked, how much has been spent on properties in Switzerland or Florida or other places around the globe that are in your name or the name of your government officials, I'm sure he understands that, because he's taken vacations to some very nice homes which seem to have been popped up and purchased since the beginning of the war. But look, it's not okay for $125 billion to not be accounted for. And on top of that, too, if you and I were running a business and we received a loan, Mark, and it was earmarked for, let's be reasonable, it was $100,000. That's how the most Americans would do a lot with $100,000. Out of the $100,000, you only received $25,000 into your bank account. Mark, I'm sure you and I would be screaming from the mountaintop asking, where the heck is this other money that we're on the hook for? Where the heck is this other money that has been allocated for us? We wouldn't have been quiet. We wouldn't have brought it up flippantly in some interview 2 years later. No, this isn't real. That is propaganda, what we just heard there, and I don't take him at his word. We require an accounting of the money that was taken from hardworking Americans to fund the defense and protection of Ukraine. Even if you're not for it, the money was spent. And if it's not accounted for, we have to cut it off today. No more until you find, maybe you can find that money. Use that money to fund yourself. Maybe you're going to have to look into your own pockets, but there'll be no more taken from the farmers and mothers of this country to fund your corruption.
It's a total disgrace. And Roger has talked about this often here on the Stone Zone, that Zelensky goes around to the United States literally begging for money. At the same time, our own residents are struggling, suffering, and dying. And oftentimes in some of these major cities and in Indian country, living in third world conditions right here in the United States of America. And he does it, Ed, wearing a old sweatshirt and cargo pants. Doesn't
even bother to wear a suit.
Even when he addressed a joint meeting of Congress, where there is a dress code, as you know, to be on the House or Senate floor and the U.S. Capitol, there is a dress code. It's applied to everyone except Zelensky. And I wanted to get your thoughts on this. I thought it was another disgrace that the Democrats, I didn't see any American flags waving on the floor of the United States House of Representatives when Vladimir Zelensky spoke. They were all Ukrainian flags that they were waving on the Democratic side of the House chamber. And yet now we're seeing hundreds of billions of dollars just poof, missing. Ed, it's unbelievable.
This is why President Trump won. Americans don't feel like the country belongs to us anymore. Right? The administration that's coming in, and that's the election's over. I think for a lot of people, they need to understand this on the other side. We had the election. We're now taking control. We're taking power. And one of the things we're doing is we're reinstilling patriotism, nationalism, and common sense. We're going to stop advocating for everyone but ourselves. Why would we do that anymore? We've already debated this with you. You tried to kill our candidate over it, okay? But if you need another dose of this, we're going to focus on this country for your own good, for the country's good, for your families and your kids to come. Everyone's going to thank President Trump. Your kids will thank him, even if you hate him. But we're done with the waving of other flags. We're done with the sending of the money to other countries that have no tangible benefit to this country. I think for the Democrats, I noticed, by the way, over the weekend, that they are making a shift. And maybe this is something I'll see you go into in the coming future. They are making a shift. They do realize that the old guard of the Democrat Party is failed, and they're not popular. And that's why, again, they brought in David Hogg as vice chair of the DNC. That's not just a kind of a placeholder. They know they have to look to this next generation of Democrats to even have a chance at competing with us, because the old guard, the Chuck Schumers, for example, they have no credibility left with their voting base. Their voting base sees them as a bunch of liars, which is, again, one of the big reasons why President Trump won. President Trump won because even if they hate him, they do credibly fear he's going to carry out the things that he says he's going to do. The Democrats, all they do is lie to you. And on top of that, it looks like they've stolen billions of dollars from you. Because it's not just from Republican pockets. It's not just from MAGA grandmas and moms that got that money taken. It's Democrats in cities, lawyers, ones who are so cheap they don't want to spend any money on anything other than their own mansions and their own future. Well, guess what? They stole from you too. Chuck Schumer stole your money, and he also lied to you. And that's why they're losing, and that's why President Trump won.
It's interesting, and I'll close with this, is the Special Inspector General for Iraq Reconstruction and Afghanistan Reconstruction, Sigar and Sigar, they concluded that after the Bush and Obama administrations, that literally the United States had blindly handed over billions and billions and billions of dollars in Iraq and Afghanistan. And the final analysis was, this will never happen again. We've learned our lesson. Well,
Mark, I can confirm that. By the way, just quickly, I was in Kirkuk in 2011, 2012. I personally witnessed connexes full of weapons, money, equipment that we just left. We just left in a forward operating base Warrior, for example. And an officer told me we'd left about $100 million of equipment there, which then soon after ISIS came in and took that, and I'm sure it went off onto other people from there. But I can personally confirm, and don't even have to take me for it. You see the audit reports from Afghanistan. They are still doing it. And we just did it in Ukraine. It cannot be done anymore because we can't afford it.
And this is how we make America great again. We provide some financial transparency and accountability. America first. Ed Szall, investigative reporter and producer of Died Suddenly. Ed, thanks for joining me here on the Stone Zone. Look forward to having you again on real soon.
God bless you, Mark. Thank you so much.
And that wraps up today's episode of the Stone Zone. Roger will be back tomorrow. Until then, thank you, God bless, and good night.
A man who's gone through hell, but he's kept going, and he's smart, and he's strong, and people love him. Not everybody, but people love him and respect him. Roger Stone. Where's Roger Stone?